International financiers that are meant to fund the construction of about 20 modular refineries in Nigeria have withheld their funds due to the challenge of getting guarantees for crude oil supply to the facilities when they are completed. The majority of foreign oil corporations that produce crude oil in Nigeria have not been able to promise financiers that crude will be provided to the modular refineries when the facilities are ready to produce refined petroleum products. Now, based on this, those who funded the facilities withheld their money pending when the federal government would persuade IOCs to give the assurances necessary for the supply of crude oil to modular refiners. To discuss this, we're joined by Temitokpe Kolade, Senior Manager and Lead ESG and Climate Change Services at Anderson. Hello, Temitokpe. Thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. Now, Temitokpe, given the concerns of international financiers, what alternative crude oil supply options could be explored to ensure the viability of these 20 modular refineries?
Well, the truth is we do have indigenous producers of petroleum, crude oil in itself. And so those should ordinarily be some sort of alternatives, but the chances are very limited other than the fact that we have IOCs and the indigenous producers. You'd have to probably talk about importing crude into Nigeria, which is going to come at its own cost as well. We know that in the recent past, Dangote had to look out of Nigeria to even get crude oil to get his refinery working, for instance. So the implication of this is that, again, if these modular refineries, which are smaller, have to do this, it's going to be a very great strain for the operationalization.
Okay. Now, but how can the Nigerian government incentivize international oil companies, to provide crude oil supply guarantees, emphasis on guarantees, to these modular refineries?
I think it's a very tough one, even for the federal government, and they've expressed it in their reports, for instance, that we also need you to demonstrate as modular refinery operators that you are really ready to run. So it's more like the case of the chicken and the egg, which goes first, right? While they're saying, oh, we need guarantees so that financiers can come and put in money and ensure that our equipment are running and we are ready to refine, they're also saying we can't give you the guarantees until we see that you have moved your, implementation of and construction work of the refineries to a very reasonable point, and we are sure that you're not just going to do arbitrage. You're not going to buy off the crude and you sell at some margins from us. So I think it's a tough one, even for the federal government, and the NUPRC had said, see, we need you to also go forward and show that you are really ready for this. Again, because it's a pricing issue. In the long run, anyone who produces crude would understand that sometimes you even need forward markets. You need off-takers that you've had contracts with already, and you can already sell to them and not just waiting for the modular refineries. And I agree that maybe the government needs to come in and say, oh, we need some sort of demonstration of domestic supply, meeting this domestic supply obligation, which is already enshrined in the Petroleum Industry Act. And maybe that's where the regulator could indeed come in and say, oh, you know what? When you get to this percentage of completion of your modular refineries, we will help you engage with the IOCs and all other producers of crude oil, and then we'll see how we give some sort of conditional guarantees maybe that would help to secure the funding that you also need for completion.
All right, now you did talk about, this basically being a pricing issue, but beyond the current impasse or beyond the pricing issue, are there other broader challenges facing the development and operation of modular refineries in Nigeria? Because it does seem like, a case of taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps backwards.
Apparently, because if you check it, the crude oil production in Nigeria, the output has not been stable. And in recent times, it's been more of going on the low than even going up. Right. And again, you realize that just recently, the NNPCL and the federal government secured funding through Afrexim to ensure that, oh, you know what, we have some natural resources that are backing this sort of funding that we're getting. And again, that only means that you have sold even the crude oil that you expect to produce in the future. And so these are some of the challenges that we face as a nation in terms of the fact that production is not at its peak, is not at its optimum. And then the little that we think would even produce in the long run or in the medium term, we've forward sold them to the extent that we now need to plead with more people to produce, and so we can meet the needs. And so much so that even Dangote Refinery, like I mentioned earlier, has to seek for importation of crude to produce refined products in Nigeria. It's really not a good place that we are in Nigeria, but apparently if you're going to solve that impasse, then we have to get more investment into oil production in Nigeria, and we have to deal with the security issues at the same time.
Okay, now let's speak to the future now, Temi Tokwe. Now, in the event that these 20 refineries are not built, which will definitely be a huge loss for Nigeria, what are the potential economic consequences for Nigeria, considering the goal of increased domestic refining capacity?
Well, I think you've answered the question already, because we won't be able to meet that domestic production capacity. And that would mean a lot for our foreign exchange system that we're already having a very tough time within the country. It means that we're going to be import dependent for quite a while, even though we have Dangote refinery operating already, and then we have some impact on diesel. But you would expect that it shouldn't also be a monopoly. We should have all the modular refineries working, and that we can indeed be like the West African hub at the least for petroleum products. And so if you're going to achieve that dream, we've got to ensure that these modular refineries work. And I mean, these are private people apparently, and it means that they want to do business in the most certain and sincere manners that will allow market system to run. Otherwise, we'll continue to have a regulated petroleum system in Nigeria. We'll continue to deal with issues of whether we are paying subsidy or we are not. And those non-transparent issues will continue to linger if we don't deal with it. So the implications are a lot, but primarily because, primarily what you would expect is that we continue to be an import-dependent country, whereas we produce crude, and that's not good for the financial system of the country, aside from just the energy security issues that are also attendant.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Temi Tokwe, for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us.
Thank you very much for having me.